We warmly welcome all of you to this edition of JW Broadcasting.
Yup, I'm also wondering the same thing. Is that a black man leading JW Broadcasting? The last time a non-white man led JW Broadcasting was in 2023 with Samuel Hurd's last JW Broadcasting. Unless you count this guy as not being white, he also did the last thing in 2023. The last time a black man who was not part of the governing body led JW Broadcasting was in 2022. Since then, it has been led by no one other than white men, sometimes old, sometimes very old. But this isn't what you think, because this guy isn't gonna be here for a while. You see, this is about the Gilead graduation. So this guy is here not to even give a talk or to say anything in between the segments. It's just here to present the Gilead graduation and all of the videos with all of the white men you are used to watch. Half of the governing body is in this almost. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's begin.
March 8th, 2025. Graduation day for the 157th class of the Watchtower Bible School of Gilead. 54 graduates from 28 countries completed months of intense Bible instruction. Before receiving their diplomas, what parting words of encouragement did they receive from members of the governing body, their instructors, and other experienced brothers? We are pleased to share with you parts from that graduation program.
Yup, this is pretty much his whole appearance, other than the last moment of the JW Broadcasting where they talk about the Netherlands, this time from all places. So, he's not going to be here, but you know who is going to be here.
So, dear Gilead students, this is your day. Can you believe it? Graduation day, March 8th, 2025.
Yup, is Gage Flegel, real name, who is here to just talk to the Gilead graduates about how exciting it is that they graduated Gilead for some reason. They do this every year, and it's got me thinking, maybe they should do this live, because at least it would be, I don't know, a little entertaining to see this live. Like, let's boring, shall we say. And the Gilead graduation is just a speech given by governing body members, because they have managed to indoctrinate these few couples, re-indoctrinating them with 5 weeks of intense cult propaganda, not about the Bible, but about how this religion does things. You're going to note that they are sent to stabilize congregations. Stabilizing congregations is not a term in the Bible. Stabilizing congregations refers to this cult making sure that every single congregation does everything the cult way. That is what straightening congregations is about, is making sure that they follow the right way according to Jehovah's Witnesses, which they've been studying for 5 weeks. That's why they study not the Bible, but the cult's rules and propaganda, because these are not experts in the Bible or anything. They are simply direct enforcers for this cult that they can send to pretty much any congregation that is not playing by their rules.
But during the past 5 months, you've developed a spiritual feeding program like no other. Study and preparation in advance of each day in the classroom, you remember the intensity, you remember the blood, the sweat, the tears, in a sense, as you prepared for classes, as you prepared for tests. The challenge of keeping up with all of that. Well, maybe the last couple days you've gone through Gilead withdrawal in a sense.
You will never find any example in the Bible of people being this affected by their studies on the scriptures or their studies on what God wanted. This isn't what God wants. This isn't the normal or right way of studying the Bible, even if you follow Bible standards. They only arrive to this intensity and to this blood and tears and all of that because they need to study and remember a ginormous amount of not what the Bible says, but what this religion has said before. And Gage Flegel, real name, is here to remind them that they are not allowed to stop with this heavy indoctrination program.
You can expect to face bigger tests in your assignments than you even had in the classroom. So instead of a bear before hibernation, let's compare your situation to a bird before migration. They too enter a state called hyperphagia, preparing them for their long flights, to prepare them for the work ahead. You might not be migrating, although some of you will be, yes. But maybe you received a new assignment for which you need to keep strengthening your spirituality. What's the key to success? Stay hungry. Stay hungry.
A good Jehovah's Witness elder has to stay hungry because this cult keeps changing the rules so often that you need to read a large amount of propaganda just to be able to keep up. I can't keep up with everything that this cult pumps out, even though doing this is basically my full-time job that I don't get paid for. That is why it's so important for any Jehovah's Witness, especially one that is going to enforce the rules, to stay hungry, to make sure that they read and understand everything that this cult pumps out. Because you never know when things might change a little bit that might mean that someone may actually get disfellowshipped or leave them in a stage where their family can at least acknowledge their existence. And Gage is about to remind us of just how much this cult pumps out.
For instance, what's available in JW Library alone? Over 330 morning worship programs, over 10 years of broadcasts. That's more than 120 hours of spiritual food. 3 complete years of regional conventions from 20 to 2022. We can watch them again if we choose. That's just some of the video content, not to mention audio, including music. And what about written publications? Well, the Watchtower magazines go back to 1950. The Awake magazines go back to 1970.
Wait, why is that? How come Watchtower magazines are good for all the way back to 50 years, but the Awake magazines get like a 20-year cutoff later? Also, yeah, they pumped out a lot of content before, because before they used to sell that content. Watchtower magazines, books, and all of that stuff were available for a price. That was their business model, which is why pumping out all of this content now in video form is meaningless, because this is always regurgitated propaganda of what they've been saying over and over and over again, just with the tiny changes that you need to keep up with. They haven't said anything new since they predicted that the end would come in 1975 and then taken it back. It's been over a generation at this point. Maybe the generation that would not pass away. They did pass away. The only thing that didn't pass away was the doctrine that they believed in. After this, Gage Flegel goes on and on and on about how you have to stay hungry without saying anything that he hasn't said before for over 6 minutes before introducing their pretend interview segment, The Inside Story, a segment that pretends to be like a talk show, complete with the live jazz and whatever, but is far more cringe than that.
Welcome to The Inside Story. In the book of Acts, chapter 1, verse 8.
He already lost me. Doesn't he know that an intro is supposed to have a hook to engage people to keep watching? Don't quote the Bible. You're supposed to say something interesting at this point.
I love the Amazon region.
So what is it about the Amazon region, Fernando?
Maybe 2 words, the people.
Nice.
They are amazing.
I'm interested. What is it about the people there?
They really accept the truth. They have a good inclination to serve Jehovah or to hear about God. And it's amazing because we are able to preach to them all the time.
As opposed to which country exactly? Jehovah's Witnesses preach to people all the time, everywhere. But Fernando here is obviously referring to how easy it is to preach and convert indigenous people in Brazil. Indigenous people in the Americas are disenfranchised, often being victims of systematic racism for generations. So groups like these that reach out to them and offer them a community can take advantage of them very easily because they need a community, they need support. And converting them is so important for this cult that they have not one, but 2 different schools dedicated to teach other Jehovah's Witnesses how to colonize these indigenous people into their cult.
An incredible help has been the School for Kingdom Evangelizers.
Here in Brazil, we have 2 educational centers for SKE, as well as some satellite locations. In the past 2 years alone, 54 classes have been held.
The school is very focused on the Amazon region because there's such a need there. In fact, a quarter of all graduates from Brazil go to that area. But once the graduates arrive, they are not left on their own. The local brothers teach them things like what to say or not say, how to act in certain situations.
Yeah, because that's not their culture. They're just pretending like it is. They're pretending to be locals to convert people into their cult. This shows the toxic positivity on Jehovah's Witnesses and how important it is for them to appear like they're nice and gentle, gregarious people, because it's used as an indoctrination tool. The next interview is with a couple from the UK that moved to Mexico to preach because we need to keep with the colonization theme, I guess. But is what the woman said what caught my eye, because this is a very weird yet very powerful indoctrination tool under the belt of Jehovah's Witnesses.
One day a friend invited me, she sent me a message, she said there's a chance for us to go to Honduras together. It's a small island called Guanaja in the middle of the Caribbean. It's like, why not? Doesn't sound like something you should turn down. But at the time I had no money. I had nothing in the bank. I was filling my car up with $2 worth of petrol at a time. We're not going very far. And just at that time, within the half hour of her message, my work offered me a full-time position for just for a couple of months. So I said yes. So Jehovah gave me a way to go to Honduras.
She says that it wasn't something that she could turn down, because you're taught as a Jehovah's Witness that you are supposed to say yes to offers like these offers to go indoctrinate other people in other places, even if you have absolutely no money. If you have some money, then that is Jehovah right there, giving you money so you can go indoctrinate other people. This is very powerful for Jehovah's Witnesses because it makes them feel like they cannot say no when it comes to do anything for this cult, whether they have the money or not. This obviously leads people to spread themselves too thin, trying to do too much for the cult, often sacrificing the opportunities professionally to get out of this rut of not having enough money because you spend way too long doing stuff for the cult because you feel like you are never allowed to say no. Anyway, this couldn't be an interview with a married couple in the Jehovah's Witnesses if we didn't add just a little bit of misogyny over here.
Judah, for you, as a young single special pioneer, did you enjoy the hospitality?
I did, and I have to say that it was kind of embarrassing, the hospitality I was shown, so much so that I pretty much never cooked. So
He still doesn't.
Nothing like a little bit of weaponized incompetence to remind everybody that if a man doesn't cook, hey, it isn't his fault. It's just people are too hospitable and he just got used to it, and that's why he doesn't cook anymore, even though they both have just as much to do in this religion. And look, I get this is a joke, but it's indicative of the culture of misogyny in the Jehovah's Witnesses, where the man and the woman still have very traditionalized roles inside the home. Sure, a man may be seen washing dishes sometimes in their propaganda, but it means very little when you hear these kinds of jokes a little bit too many times.
by September 2012, the preaching work in Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama all came under the supervision of the Central America branch in Mexico.
This is an excerpt that I found interesting in the video that the couple presented about the Mexican branch. Because, first of all, Mexico is not in Central America. It's in North America. It makes no sense that it's the Central America branch when it's still in North America. But second, because did you hear how many countries the branch is responsible for?
The preaching work in Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama all came under the supervision of the Central America branch in Mexico.
I grew up in Mexico, and I remember that our branch, the Mexican branch, used to only be responsible for Mexico and Belize. This shows you how much the religion has streamlined since the 90s. And gives you a clue of just how many branches they have had to close.
We got approved to stay in Bethel, and then just a few months after we got married, we had this possibility to serve in another branch. But we consider, talk about it, we pray about it, maybe another time.
You're in Bethel.
But you ended up in the Philippines.
Yeah, just 3 months later, this next opportunity came, new invitation to go to the Philippines. So we realized Jehovah wanted us to go to a foreign assignment, and we prayed about it and said yes. We didn't want to be like Jonah and say no, so we're like, let's go.
This again shows us how Jehovah's Witnesses are manipulated into doing whatever the call wants them to do. The invitations to serve in other places are not really optional, because if you receive like 2 in a row and you reject 2 in a row, then you might be like Jonah, who, rejected his invitation to preach and was swallowed by a whale or something for like 3 days. As a Jehovah's Witness, you are not allowed to say no. You don't even know what consent is, because you are taught that Jehovah, aka this religion, can ask you to do whatever this religion wants, and you are not really allowed to say no, at least not very frequently.
It's not hard to talk to people about the truth or about the Bible, especially the Bible, like Judah mentioned and Fernando mentioned about these regions. So they have a real respect for the Bible. So we have all these arrangements in place, like street witnessing, metropolitan witnessing, cart witnessing. We have a variety of business territories to cover, and we also have mall witnessing.
And now we get to the real reason why this guy and his wife got transferred to this area. Because this is one of the last areas in the world where people still believe in the Bible, and where this cult has at least a chance of converting people. Before, they used to have a large community in places like the United States and Europe, but with the fall of religion in those places, fewer and fewer people are willing to be Jehovah's Witnesses, even if they're born in their religion, let alone finding it attractive because someone preached to you. To me, this is a clear example of how the Jehovah's Witness leadership is so worried about where their future converts will come next, that they are willing to transfer and send people over to places that at least still believe in the Bible. If you're in those places, you may now find Jehovah's Witnesses in the mall nearest to you.
Personally, it's very encouraging to see how the brothers and sisters endure faithfully and joyfully. They endure not because they do not have a choice. They endure because they are happy, doing God's work and loving the people.
Yes, as you can see, the Philippines is a preaching paradise.
Jehovah is making sure that no one gets missed in this historic time of the end.
It has been a historic time of the end for over 150 years now. But this is the tail end of a video talking about how the Jehovah's Witnesses are intensifying their preaching work now in the Philippines, another place where people are disenfranchised and need a better future, even if they have to believe a cult for it, just as in Mexico, Central America, and South America. This is where the leadership believes the future of this religion lies on. on converting the poorest, most disenfranchised, least educated people in third world countries. But after this ends, and after another speech that we're going to skip for now, we finally get to what is probably the dumbest Jehovah's Witness tradition.
Well, would you like to see the entire class?
You see, originally, they did this because they took a photo of the class and then they published it in an article on the Watchtower magazine. That's why they were seated like this. But now they have to go up the podium and then just pose so no one takes a photo because this is a video. Why have they not updated this? Why do they still do that? This makes no sense. Why do they still pose for a photo if they're taking a video? There has to be a better way of showing all of them, right? Like, what about a little slideshow of them doing silly faces towards the camera, 90s sitcom style? Like, that would at least be appropriate to the medium that they're using. But what they did add is probably the creepiest, most sinister part of this whole thing. A long letter to thank not Jehovah, not Jesus. Jesus isn't even mentioned in this talk. But to thank the governing body.
To the governing body. Over the past 5 months, we have seen our grand instructor with our own eyes. We journeyed through his word, and now our hearts are overflowing with love, gratitude, and trust in him. We thank you for the undeserved privilege to dig deep into and immerse ourselves in God's word. We appreciate the time and energy that you shared with our class. We benefited not only from the lectures, but also the attention you dedicated to us afterwards. We have been strengthened and encouraged by your humility and how you have cultivated the mind of Christ. Your deep love and respect for Jehovah's word motivates us to continue to build our own appreciation. Your self-sacrificing spirit encourages us to imitate your example. We are thankful that Jehovah uses you as a means to instruct us about the good way in which we should walk.
This goes on for a while, and the letter does thank other people than the governing body, like the entire Bethel family. But most of this letter is spent not just thanking, but validating the governing body, saying how good it is that Jehovah chose them to lead his people, which is the guys writing this letter. This isn't a thank you letter. This is a submission letter that the governing body instructed them to write. Because remember, the governing body are the ones who changed it so they had to write a letter to the governing body, who are the ones who are instructed to teach these classes. Now that we have this on video, we'll still make them pose like they're about to take a photograph, even though they're not taking a photograph. But we'll make them write a letter of submission and read it out loud so everyone knows how submitted they are to us, the governing body thought. And this, again, shows us how this cult is moving towards being a cult of personality. For over a generation, this cult had successfully moved away from that since the death of Rutherford, and had perpetuated this myth that they didn't even know who the leaders of the Jehovah's Witnesses were because Jesus was their leader. They were an anomaly in cults because cults are usually led by charismatic leaders. And they are still an anomaly in cults because they're still not led by charismatic leaders. They are just leaders that you are supposed to find charismatic. But they can no longer say that they are not a cult because they don't have leaders, because they definitely have leaders. This guy had to write a letter thanking the leaders and validating their leaders just because their leaders instructed them to.
So David thirsted for Jehovah.
Yeah, we're going to skip this Gage Flegel talk, again, real name, which is all about how you need to be thirsty for Jehovah because David was thirsty for Jehovah, and that means that you need to keep re-indoctrinating yourself over and over again. Whatever you think that was about, it's literally better than what it was literally about. Believe me, even the guys at Gilead are just like glazing their eyes and thinking, what is there for lunch? What is there for lunch, actually?
How faith strengthening and encouraging, not only for the Gilead graduates, but for each of us. And there's more. In the coming weeks, look for additional talks from the graduation and the JW.
Yeah, nobody watches those. Not even Jehovah's Witnesses watch those. Like, not even the people who were there watch those, because they were there already. Why are they going to watch those? They already had to go through it once. But with that, and a postcard from the Netherlands, from all places, the one country I wish I could just move into and disappear, this JW broadcasting finally comes to an end. And I gotta tell you, when I saw this guy appear on my screen the first time I was watching JW broadcasting, I was kind of excited. I was like, oh, at least a little bit of variety. First non-white dude to present JW broadcasting in like 3 years. This cult is so boring that I was excited for at least that being changed. But alas, this was nothing but a Trojan horse. This guy was here to fool us into thinking that they were gonna do something slightly different, when no, it was all, like always, about the governing body and how the governing body deserves all the praise, especially during these historic times of the end. If you got all the way over here, consider subscribing and maybe supporting me like this guy's over here. I cut out a whole segment of Mark Sanderson talking about how Jehovah's Witnesses are annoying that I feel really deserves its own video, and you can watch it early by joining my Patreon or my YouTube supporters.